Hey,
Hello.
whoop. I'm not going to edit this out. This was great. Hey guys, welcome back for another week. Episode 10. I can't believe we haven't been banned from YouTube yet. Lovely Luba, welcome back. Say hi to everybody.
Hello.
What kind of tea are you drinking today?
Well, I'm still drinking, this mint tea. I've been drinking a lot of mint tea lately. It opens up the throat. It is very magical. And you?
Wow. I'm still boring. I'm drinking some regular oolong tea, some green tea.
And you're in Warsaw. Are there any interesting teas there at all?
I found this really nice for anybody who's planning on going to Warsaw. There's a great place on Nowy Swiat street, and it's a very touristy street. Beautiful, beautiful street.
Yeah.
And there's like this tea shop, and I went in, of course, to buy some jasmine green tea. But I feel like next time I'm gonna go this week and be like more adventurous and just pick out some random interesting looking tea and let's hope that the consequences. Let's hope I'll be alive for episode 11. Let's put it that way.
Sounds great. So tell me about Polish women. Are they very beautiful?
It's impossible to walk 5 feet without falling in love. They're so beautiful and so feminine and just absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. It's such a treat to be here. Um, yeah, I love it. I'm quite happy. So today we're going to talk about a very interesting topic because it's something that a lot of clients that I've dealt with, both male and female, have trouble not only understanding but also applying. And I'm assuming it's the same on your end, Luba. But we're going to be talking about letting go today, and more specifically, letting go of your story of poor little me, as I like to call it. And if Luba, you want to throw in a different term, you're welcome to. But why don't you get us started?
Yeah. Letting go of your life myth sometimes.
Mm.
So like the sometimes those stories are little recent stories, but usually they are also based on some kind of a deeper story that we tell ourselves from our first childhood dream. So what happens is like it's almost like we have a ball of threads and we
Mhm.
can take and start, untying the rope
Yeah.
one by one. And sometimes it's important to be very consistent. Sometimes we want to cut through it, and that's also possible. In fact, Vipassana meditation is a tool to totally just cut through it, as
Yeah.
opposed to like really taking out the threads from our subconscious mind, and following through and seeing that original hurt. And usually the original hurt exists beyond our personal life. It's usually also passed on to us through our parents and passed on to them through their parents and common ancestors. And honestly, there is also something. How did we get here? Why are we having such a challenge, right, with loving each other unconditionally?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, what is this human condition? When we got here, do you remember choosing this? Like from the very beginning? Probably not.
No.
But somehow humanity started living here on this planet based on the survival instinct, right? It was important to fight. It was important sometimes to kill. It was important for that instinct, that animalistic instinct on this three-dimensional space to unleash itself and to be readily available, that wildness, to survive.
Yeah.
We're still dealing with that. We're still dealing with that element of human design that became, that made our interactions on many levels cruel, to survive. That is the basis for the original wound, for the like primal wound, and also death, of course. We
Yeah.
love somebody, and according to human design, our whole being comes into the longing zone, our whole being merges with this other being. Maybe when another being is cut off, of course, there is this longing for somebody who's diseased. There is this fear that you will be no more. And that is also the part of this original wound. So just our mortality itself and our reluctance to die, that is really the basis of what we're dealing with, right? And that gave everything else, put everything else in motion, which is wars, cruel competition, and things which came out of it, like abuse, like treason, like betrayal, and everything else. So that's what we're dealing with. This is our human story.
I would take it a step further. When you're talking about death, let's be honest here. Today, what we're actually dealing with is ego death. I mean, it's the death of this story that we're clinging to, and that's the problem. Is that, you know, there's no substantial threat in the same way that there is a threat to our sense of self rather than to our actual selves. And it's the reason that so many people play it safe, and I find it just outrageous, the sheer amount of people who are pardon me, who are completely okay with good enough, right? This just amount of people who are not in love with their partners, who are dragging their feet to a job that they hate, who are who are stuck with friends who don't inspire them and don't uplift them, who are willing to even take abuse, and all that comes from one place, which is fear, and that fear is ego death, fear of taking the risk and failing. And so there's two forces in the world. The way that I see it is there's love and there's fear.
Yeah.
Right? Everything comes from one of those two. Everything that's joy and happiness and ease and peace, it comes from love. And everything that's anger, hatred, violence, despair, depression, sadness, sorrow, pity, etc., all comes from fear. And ego is the personification of this fear, and love is the solution of this fear. It's fully just falling in the same way. When you fall in love, and I don't just mean romantic love, but when you fall in love with love itself, with life itself, it's like falling into a bed. That's why it's falling in love. It's not.
I love that.
It's not jumping in love. It's not standing in love. It's falling. You just collapse onto this comfortable bed, and you're just right.
Yeah, it sounds great. For sure. And yes, you're right. Well, people get stuck, right? They get stuck in their stories, and what happens is that they suspend themselves. They suspend themselves between the heaven and the earth by creating, and I could argue that their soul subconsciously is creating diseases, difficult situations, unresolvable triangles, whatever it is, just to hold them suspended between heaven and earth so that they wouldn't fully reside anywhere, but just like making them live the life as a rehearsal, constantly getting ready for that first night of coming out, right? It is this relationship with time, and also making things seem temporary, and not putting 100% into those things. That's like playing it safe. It's kind of like, yeah, this is my situation. It sucks. Nothing I can do about it right now, but it's temporary. It's going to change. I'm sure it's going to change. But the truth is, it doesn't change by itself, and nothing is as permanent as something that is perceived temporary.
Yeah. The interesting thing too is that voice saying, yeah, there's nothing I can do about it. I could do that, but I don't really want that. That's not you. That's your tormentor. And the fact is that ever since we were born, we're carrying within us this tormentor. And he's living in your head, and he's feeding you this bullshit story as to who you are and why you're not good enough. And the way that I see it is, I mean, first of all, it's thought, and this isn't, I didn't come up with any of this. I mean, this was the Buddha's realization, right? Is that you are not the contents of your mind. You're not the mind at all, actually.
Yeah.
You are the Atman, or in Buddhism, you're the Anatman. But the point being that you are a being. You're not a doing. And the moment you catch yourself doing is when you've identified with this voice that's nonstop feeding you, I'm depressed, I'm this, I'm that. And the funny thing too is, like, you can see the effects it has. And I remember, I'll always remember this guy. I will always remember him. When I first began coaching, almost 5 years ago, I was sitting at a conference in Montreal, and I was invited to speak. And after I finished speaking, I was taking questions, and this one guy raised his hand. And just by seeing him, you can I can't explain it. It's like there was a dark cloud hanging over his head. Like I can feel the darkness coming off this guy. And he was talking about how he's depressed and how his life isn't working out. And I said, "What are you passionate about? What are you excited about? What are you in love with?" And nothing. He can't think of anything. And ultimately he identified with his tormentor. It fed him this story so much that he actually began to believe it, which is the fallacy of existence, is that you're a being you're not doing.
Yeah.
But anyway, before we discuss concrete steps to get over this, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, I love this role, like how you identified this role as a tormentor. It could be like a spinster, or it could be some kind of inner critic. But like I do like the term tormentor much better, actually. And yes, a lot of people do identify with that tormentor and feel that their tormentor is actually their real identity.
Exactly.
So what I want to say is this to our audience. You have no real identity. Nobody cares. And you should not care who you are, what you are, or any of this. You are what you think in the moment. Everything else is just some kind of past story that you can choose or not to believe in. What we are is we're just beings in progress, which are always changing. So thinking about yourself that I'm like this, I'm like that, I fly, I don't fly, I fly airplanes, I don't eat this, I don't do this. You did not, but you don't know if you're going to be the same way in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Allow yourself endless possibilities at every moment in time, and your life will completely change. And I can tell you many stories about my own resurrections, rejuvenations, and like tons and tons of them. And again, I just want to bring in one enormous benefit that you get from that attitude is the youth. Really, is the youth, and keeping the passion alive and looking great as well. And so basically one of the things that I had to dismantle so many ideas about myself. For years, I dismantled at least 10 very deep ideas about myself every year of my life. So there was just like maybe we can go into one of them, which I think is pretty cool. Unless you want to say something, Patrick.
No, tell us about it, sure.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, I became a pretty famous teacher, and I was holding very big space for a lot of people in different workshops. Let's say sometimes I would be sitting there, there would be 50, 60 people. There were events that I was holding, sometimes were 100 people, 200 people. And so I became this person of authority. And there was a moment when I realized that becoming that healer slash teacher, that person of authority, was really jeopardizing my feminine nature. And maybe I didn't realize it in 1 second, maybe it took me some time, but I did realize that. And so I decided to follow my own advice, which is usually very good for a teacher, and to develop my feminine side through dance. And very late in life, I went to a dance retreat where everyone was younger than me. They were all like dancing since they were 18 years old. They were dancing for many years. And here I was. I came in. I always found physical exercise challenging in my life. I was the absolutely worst student in that retreat. And that retreat was 5 days in Costa Rica, dancing 8 hours a day. A
Wow.
very difficult tribal fusion dance where our teacher was amazing. She said, well, listen, she said to all these students, she said, if you feel like you're dying and you want to run away, that's exactly like when you have to stay. So I felt like I'm dying and I wanted to run away probably 5 times an hour. And I went through it, and it was very humbling. Here I was, this big teacher with big authority, with everyone listening to me, and I brought myself to be this absolutely worst student among all these much younger, trained dancers. And I cannot even tell you what the transformation that was.
Has
But
your
yeah.
as a when you've been humbled like this, I want to ask you, and this is for all of our listeners, but has who you are been diminished in any way
Not
whatsoever?
at all.
Exactly.
On the contrary, all this extra BS that I was kind of holding, that persona that I felt was me, and that persona which I felt was necessary. And that persona was beautiful, by the way. She was stunning. She was the mother to all. She was completely gorgeous. And yet at that time, the Mother Teresa, she just had to go. And I had to develop a whole new aspect of my personality. And I decided to call this aspect a dancer. Dancer. And then I was like, I'm a dancer. And I knew that being a dancer is as much of a role in some ways as being Mother Teresa, right?
It's another identity.
Exactly. It's just like this new identity that I needed to play with in order to bring myself in more balance, in order to be more happy. And did it diminish who I am? Not at all. On the contrary, it gave me so much richness, and it gave me freedom from who I was before. So
I want to call this. I want to use your example actually because it's very funny that you mentioned it. You as a person, we've established this early on, right? You're highly feminine. Your essence is very feminine, and obviously, and my essence is very masculine. And it's funny how our practices always lead us to this kind of stripped away, just core truth that we are our essences. And the feminine itself, the feminine energy is flow and it is change, and you've expressed it perfectly. You felt the need that something was screaming at you that it needed to change, there needed to be, so, it needed to move. And on top of that, you picked the most feminine meditation, which is dance, right? You immerse yourself in movement and in flow, and it's beautiful because it's therapeutic ultimately, right? If your essence is feminine, don't go to some meditation retreat and sit and stare at yourself. You're going to be bored out of your skull. Go and dance, go and flow, and go and be the change that you're aching to be. And
yeah.
I want to complement your story with one of my own, which was I myself went through a fairly dark period at one point, and this is after I had become a coach, and I had this. It was very scary period because I was consciously aware of it, and at the same time I felt it. There was nothing I could. There was like a battle between my logic and my emotion, and for a period I was terrified because I thought I was going crazy, and I figured in this stage of my development this is not normal as a coach to be going through this, and I kept butting heads with it. And the moment I surrendered to it and I accepted it and I stripped away everything, and this ultimately is the very masculine practice, because the masculine spiritual enlightenment is to reconnect with that part of yourself that never changes. It's awareness itself, it's isness itself. So I want to bring attention to there's this beautiful passage. I was reading a book on the Buddha and I forgot what it was called, but this passage was so beautiful that I had to print it out and put it on my wall. It was this king who was observing the Buddha, and he wrote about it in his journal, and they had retrieved this passage. And ultimately it says that his ears are deaf to chatter and gossip. He has no desires for possessions. He is neither buoyed up by praise nor cast down by blame. He is what he is. And it's just so beautiful,
I love
because
it.
it's like Osho, who says when someone tells you you're a saint or a sinner, avoid him, because in both cases he's putting you in a box. He's given you an identity. And the masculine spiritual practice is cultivation, is to connect with the part of you that does not change, which is, and we won't give it a name, it's your isness. It's the part of you that is the infinite. And so the masculine and the feminine, we both come about it in a different way, but it's ultimately the same experience. It's to experience the masculine is emptiness and the feminine is fullness. But we're looking for the same thing.
I love that, and I love that you allowed yourself to be to be aware of the real process that you're going through. And by the way, this is a very, very important point for the audience. A lot of us don't know what we're feeling. We're not really allowing ourselves to feel our real emotions,
Yeah.
right? And so what happens then? Well, first of all, it is a terrible thing in communication. Let me give you an example. For example, one person is acting in a way that there is a lot of aggression is being expressed. Another person in interaction says, "You are angry." Person number one says, "No, I am not angry. I'm just expressing myself." The second person says, "Yeah, but it feels that you are angry. You don't even understand what you're feeling." Okay. Yeah, that, how often does that happen?
Yeah, passive aggressive.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, in this situation, it's passive aggressive, but it happens a lot when a person doesn't understand, does not allow for the sadness, anger, or confusion, right? To just doesn't allow themselves to accept that they are going through that, and you accepted that, yes, I'm a coach. It's not supposed to be happening to me, but it is happening to me. You know, it
Yeah.
happened to me also so many times. Yes, I'm a spiritual teacher. I'm not supposed to get depressed. I'm not supposed to be jealous. I'm not supposed to. So I guess it doesn't exist, right? But it does. It does. And being honest with it and knowing that, yes, it is a part of human condition. This is what I'm feeling. This is the feeling. Sometimes just accepting that feeling is already something that can allow for the feeling to go away.
Yeah. Is that your actually we're running low on time, so as your practical bit of advice, can you tell us how to apply what you just said? Because that was beautiful. How would we accept that?
Um, so there are two parts to it: accepting and making a choice. That is the mastery over, undercurrents.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, recognizing, right? Then accepting, and then making a choice. For example, I recognize, yes, oh my God, I'm speaking really fast. My cheeks are red. My voice is too intense. I guess I'm angry. I recognize that I am angry. Okay. Step number two, I'm angry. That's okay, right? Like, yeah, it's okay. That's something that's going through me. Wonderful. Because if you start fighting, that is going to get even worse. So yes, that's okay. And step number three, well, now I can make a choice. Do I want to continue with this same energy, or do I want to take a breath and just exhale the best feeling that I can possibly connect with right now in my body? Just exhale it several times, make this choice, and maybe I can take a different pathway as opposed to this anger. And what I want to recommend also is that we find ourselves in repeating patterns. This is something that we need to talk about in the next show, repeating patterns.
That's our next
And yes, exactly. And so when we do find ourselves in those repeating patterns, for example, you recognize and accept that you easily get angry, for example, then what you have to do, you have to prepare that alternative path in advance so that you would already know what to do. The moment you feel like, okay, oh my God, I'm angry, that's okay. And here is what I do about that. Instead of choosing that path of anger, I'm choosing this path of love. And you breathe out into that path of love and you keep going.
Beautiful.
So that is what I would recommend, how to start letting go of those stories.
Great.
Yeah. Is there anything that comes to your mind, Patrick?
Yeah. The simplest way to let go of yourself is to take a conscious, deep breath. To place more attention on your hearing. Really listen, almost as if somebody's whispering to you. Notice the room around you. Basically, come back. Be here. Be in this room. Nowhere else. And it begins as a practice 3 or 4 times a day. Maybe you're driving, maybe you're at the office, or you're even with your partner. Take a deep breath, come back into the room, and you'll notice how often you're really not there. Someone's talking and you're off thinking of what's the next thing to say, or you're driving and you're imagining what happened last week or what you're going to do tonight. When you be there, just bring yourself back. And then what's going to happen is the moment your story becomes too loud, your tormentor becomes too loud. This is especially helpful if you are having a bad day, if you are feeling depressed and you're, oh my God, I'm not good enough, or, this relationship is not going to work out, she's not going to answer my phone calls. That's your tormentor. That's not you. Just take a deep breath and come back to here. Pay more attention to here. And you'll notice that tormentor, his voice is going to become muffled and eventually he's just going to drown out. You have the choice to either listen to him or not. It's just a question of where you choose to place your attention. And that's wow. That's my example.
All right. I love that. And that is very tantric, actually, to come back through the senses into the inner senses, to come back into the inner truth, to open the doorways and to come back into the moment of now without any extra bullshit. It is wonderful. It is also great practice to do before you connect with somebody sexually.
Beautiful.
Great practice.
So thank you, Luba, for coming out, and I will see you next week.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right.
See you.
Well.
Bye.